The Cecil Soil Conservation District proudly presents Clarence W. Brown as our 2007 Cooperator of the Year. Clarence was born in 1917 and grew up in Wilmington until the age of 9 when the family moved to Calvert. His parents were Winter Day and Elsie Wary Brown. His father, Winter Brown, purchased the farm from Webster Brown's widow in 1925 at a bankruptcy sale. Winter had worked there previously and was quite familiar with the property. The farm was in extremely poor condition, with hay as the primary crop at that time. Clarence graduated early from the Calvert Agricultural High School at age 16. The Depression began in 1929, and the face of American agriculture began to change. Dairying became more popular locally as the need for farmers providing cheap food became critical. As technology progressed, tractors replaced the use of horses. With advances in farm machinery, the great prairies of the West soon became plowed fields. After graduating, Clarence Brown the adventurer traveled the country and developed a deeper appreciation for the natural resources of our nation. Little did he know that his path would someday collide with a man who would greatly inspire his future path. This gentleman, named Hugh Hammond Bennett, had already begun his lifetime journey to becoming the father of soil conservation. Dr. Bennett aroused the nation to the potential perilous effects of soil erosion. In 1903, Dr. Bennett began soil surveying and went on to develop the term sheet erosion. He became the nation's expert on soils, but soil conservation meant little or nothing to the public, including farmers. Bennett was disappointed that others did not see how badly erosion was hurting his native region. He began publishing in magazines such as Farm Journal, American Game, Country Gentleman, and Nature. President Franklin Roosevelt encouraged Congress to establish a civilian conservation corps. Hugh Bennett became the agency head of the newly formed Soil Erosion Service in 1933. The manpower of over 150 CCC camps nationally was transferred from the Forest Service to the Soil Erosion Service. The CCC participants were busy with demonstrations of planting trees, building erosion control structures, and planting cover crops. The Dust Bowl of the 1930s lasted about a decade. Poor agricultural practices and years of sustained drought caused this devastation to the nation. As the droughts of the early 1930s deepened, the farmers kept plowing and kept planting, but nothing would grow. The ground cover that held the soil in place was gone. The powerful winds that whipped across the plains raised billowing clouds of dust to the skies. The skies would darken for days as dust drifted like snow and covered entire farmsteads. John Steinbeck wrote in his 1939 novel, The Grapes of Wrath, "And then the dispossessed were drawn west from Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico, from Nevada and Arkansas, families, tribes, dusted out, tractored out, carloads, caravans, homeless and hungry, 20,000 and 50,000 and 100,000 and 200,000. They streamed over the mountains, hungry and restless as ants, scurrying to find work to do, to lift, to push, to pull, to pick, to cut, anything, any burden to bear for food. The kids are hungry. We got no place to live. Like ants scurrying for waste, for food, and most of all, for land." Then, on May 12, 1934, a major dust storm hit the plains, later to be described by Bennett as a turning point in the battle to draw attention to the erosion problem. Clarence understood the value of topsoil and soon began his lifelong commitment to conserving his natural resources. Americans, however, were slow to realize that soil erosion was a national problem. This great dust storm awakened the nation as people along the eastern seaboard over 2,000 miles away were covered by dark clouds of dust. Clarence remembers seeing this dust storm when he was working in Wilmington. He was totally amazed by this unbelievable event from far, far away. The Soil Conservation Service was established under USDA in 1935. Hugh Bennett was named the first chief and quickly set to work. But Bennett was upset by how slowly his agency got conservation out on the ground. He recognized the need to get more farmer involvement. In 1937, President Roosevelt sent a federal notice to all the state governors to recommend that the states join a national effort to form local conservation districts. Clarence graduated from Thompson Private Business School. He also graduated from the University of Delaware with a degree in agriculture. He returned home to assist his father, who was struggling physically and financially to keep the farm going. Clarence recalled the pressures of farming during World War II, when farmers had to meet production quotas. He aggressively sought innovation and became quite an inventor of agricultural items. This tetherall anchor was invented by Clarence to tie out cows and bulls in the days when multiflora rose hedges were used as fences. Clarence customized his manure spreader with rubber tires years before tires were popular. During the Second World War, farm tractors were hard to obtain and quite expensive. This doodlebug was formed by combining a Model A Ford and an express truck for the rear. Clarence purchased one of the earliest pickup balers with seats for the men to feed the wire ties. Clarence recalls the days when he baled straw for Mr. Kilby at Bainbridge while the construction of the military base was underway. You had to stop working and crawl under the equipment in the field when the flagman signaled a dynamite blast. Another first for this pioneer was a self-propelled Massey combine. Clarence was always seeking to learn more to make the farm successful. He traveled to College Park to hear a presentation by Hugh Bennett. Dr. Bennett came to Maryland to recruit interest in forming conservation districts. Clarence Brown left this meeting a changed man for life. He returned to Cecil County and sought to be involved with conservation demonstrations. Mr. Clarence Brown and Miss Margaret England were appointed as Cecil's first supervisors by the State Soil Conservation Committee on March 2, 1945. Clarence was elected treasurer of the board and played a key role in forming the Cecil Soil Conservation District in June 1945. The district provided an extensive education program with demonstrations, tours, and school presentations. Clarence sacrificed a great amount of time to spread the conservation message. Here, he is pictured conducting a tree planting program for the Graduate School of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. At times, the district supervisors held outdoor meetings. The C.W. Brown lime and fertilizer business began in 1940 and continues today. Clarence has strived to encourage more young farmers to join in conservation efforts.
Keep your pH levels up. By all means, take care of the lime before you waste your money on fertilizer.
The farm's first conservation plan was written in 1946, with updates in 1969, 1991, and again in 2006. A farm pond was constructed in 1947 following the design of the Soil Conservation Service. The 1-acre pond was stocked with bass and bluegills. When the pond was installed, a 500-foot-long diversion was constructed to divert field runoff around the pond, as was the common practice at that time. The pond and diversion are still in place today, and a dock has been constructed to increase the recreational value of the pond. The pond has also been fenced to keep out the livestock that graze in the adjacent pastures. The first Forest Resource Management Plan was completed in 1943 and has been updated in 1949, 1968, 1975, 1978, and 1988. Timber harvest has been conducted as per plan, as well as woodlot fencing and recreational trails built. In 1948, Clarence married Florence Delano. Florence was a newspaper journalist from Amityville, Long Island. She continued to write about country life on the farm to publish in her father's newspaper. The Browns were blessed with 3 children, son Carl and twin daughters Judy and Jane. They milked cows with impressive production until 1958. Till tillable fields were laid out for contour strip cropping.
Go up in an airplane and photograph places that had some strip cropping done on it and try to get some good shots of that. And occasionally some group of buildings that look good in the middle of all these strips and so forth.
Mr. Brown encouraged others like Herb Ewing to make conservation work their career. The strips remained in place for many years until some field areas were converted back to pasture. The farm was first subsoiled in spring of 1954 to break up the hardpan at plow depth. Mr. Brown had the district assist in putting in 600 feet of drain tile in 1962. The fences were built along the contour lines as the vast pastures complement the adjacent fields. A pond was constructed on the southeast side of the farm in 1990 with fencing installed. The pond was meant to function as a sediment trap, but 17 years later it still has good depth thanks to good farming practices on the land above it. Mr. Brown has maintained both ponds so that they have remained in beautiful shape over all these years. One of the main considerations in planning for a high level of pasture management is how stock water is distributed to grazing animals. In 1992, 1,400 feet of water lines were placed to carry water to central points in the pastures. This allows for efficient subdivision of pastures and movement of livestock. The farm was placed in a Maryland Agricultural Land Preservation Foundation district. Today, Mr. Brown is hoping to preserve his farmland permanently through the Maryland Rural Legacy Program. The 169-acre farm is currently split and leased to Mr. Brown's neighbors. Mr. Stoltzfus farms the northern portion where he incorporates rotational grazing into managing his pastures. John Sprout grazes dairy heifers and harvests hay, corn, and soybeans on the main tract. Mr. Brown enjoys watching the growth of the many trees that he planted as a younger man. Though his beloved Florence passed away in 1972, her favorite tree is still admired today. He lives on the farm with a king's view of his fields, pastures, and woodlands. The buildings are preserved to appear today much as they may have looked in the past. The kitchen has many historical and natural qualities. Mr. Brown is a unique individual with a variety of interests, including cycling, photography, inventing, and reading. In fact, he met Jeanette Sadler, his longtime companion, at a book lovers meeting. The adventurous Clarence Brown began his journey hitching rides and jumping trains. He went on to become a pilot and an avid motorcycle rider. Clarence still rides today, visiting the back 40 to make a sales call. He is extremely knowledgeable on many topics, such as agriculture, business, and natural resources, and he offers this advice to young farmers.
It's going to be your livelihood. Take care of your soils if they're yours. Take care of your soils if you rent them from somebody else. And protect the environment as best you can.
The Cecil Soil Conservation District takes great pleasure in honoring Clarence Brown for his lifetime commitment, serving his community, and conservation legacy.